Good morning. My name is Jacki Ponti-Lazaruk, and I am the Chief Innovation Officer for USDA Rural Development. So glad to be here with you as we wrap up the first day and a half of sessions on our placemaking conference. I hope all of you would agree that placemaking is an important process for our rural communities to implement economic and community development plans and journeys. I'm really excited that placemaking has taken root here at USDA and in the Innovation Center. And I've had the privilege to work in rural areas for more than 17 years now, and have visited many parts of the country and truly understand how unique and special rural areas are and how much they have to offer. Our placemaking journey at USDA actually started just a few years ago. We do a lot of community economic development as part of our day-to-day work, but the focus on placemaking as a discipline started for us in 2020 with some funding that Congress provided to us specifically for placemaking planning. It was $1 million in RPIC funding, and we were able to award 5 grants to cooperators to help with placemaking planning in various rural areas across the country. And in 2021, that number grew to 3 million, and we awarded funds to 13 cooperators. And in 2022, we were fortunate enough to have received $4 million from Congress. And we will be running an open window for those funds later this summer. But I want to, before we break out for the toolkit walkthroughs, I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've heard over the last day and a half and what we've learned. As I said, that placemaking as a discipline is something that we here in the Innovation Center are leaning into and are learning as much as we can, so that we can bring you better service, better opportunities, and to connect you with folks who can help you on your placemaking journey. And we're so happy to be able to do that. So, we got together and talked a little bit, and I hope that you would agree, and you can share in the chat lessons learned that you've had, but there were a few that stood out as I thought about the last day and a half. And it really, one of the most important things is that placemaking is about the people. People are at the heart of it. And it's about the community and a sense of place. And if it doesn't start there, it won't flourish. Your community won't have the benefit of that core set of values and vision that are so necessary for growth and sustainability in rural areas. We also heard from our friends at Higher Ground about listening. Listening is the key, and taking time to just listen and hear from others and let those ideas flow and let the discussion flow and take you where it will. Not trying to rush to the solution, not trying to rush to fill out a plan, but really kind of sitting in the discussion and getting a sense of where you want to take your community and what your community is really all about at this time. Expanding those who are in the conversation, right? We heard about looking beyond the same 10 people that you may typically work with. People who you're comfortable with, or people who are typically those who are part of economic development discussions. The idea around placemaking is to expand that circle, to bring in more voices, to bring in more perspectives, and to really dig for those nuggets of gold that will bring out that placemaking vision. Especially important, we heard about cross-sector partnerships yesterday afternoon and how important it is to make sure that there's good representation across those sectors in your community, not just the traditional economic development sectors, and looking for voices and input from places you might not have worked with before. I really loved the concept of starting small. We heard that from our friends at Partnership for Public Spaces, and I think that's a great suggestion. Don't try to take on the whole planning process all at once, but to start with one small action that you can take, one small place that you can work with, get comfortable in it, get your rhythm down, get a sense of what that accomplishment might feel like in a small sense, and then build on that as you build out a larger placemaking plan. Knowing your assets is the key, right? Most communities, at least when I've traveled, they have a great sense of what their assets have been. The challenge that we would ask is that as you sit down to think about your sense of place and where you'd like to take it and what your plan might be as you consider those assets that you haven't leaned into before, or assets that might grow in the future, and to leverage those as part of your sense of place going forward. We also heard about arts not just being for urban. You know, I'm a big fan of all things rural, and particularly country music. But we have great musicians, we have great artists, we have great architects, we have great people in rural areas, and a lot to leverage there, particularly in the arts space. So bring those voices into your discussion on placemaking. There's much to draw on there. And last but certainly not least is that you can't do it alone. This is not a one-person activity. This is not a two-person activity. This is a community-centric activity. So it requires many voices, many views. But I'd also like to leave you with the fact that you are not alone, right? You not only have each other, but you have this community. We hope that this conference is the start of this rural focused placemaking network with rural communities and experienced placemakers and those who want to support rural places and development going forward. We want it to grow organically. We want you to stay in touch. People will flow in and out of it. And we want this to continue as you work to implement the new toolkit and make your plans. And so to that end, we will be keeping the Whova platform available for at least the next 6 months, longer if we can. And you will have access to all the conference materials and to each other and to chat on the platform and to keep this great network going. We do plan in June to announce our Rural Placemaking Innovation Challenge window opening for that $4 million in planning funds. So do be on the lookout for that. That is an opportunity for you as you work through the toolkit and get your plans going to get some assistance from USDA in the planning process. And of course, as we work through the remainder of this conference and going forward, we want to hear from you. We want your input, and it's really helpful to us. It's vital to the planning for our next steps in our placemaking journey to help rural areas. I mean, USDA Rural Development is the only federal agency that is solely focused on rural areas. That's what we do. That's what we love. And we want to make sure we're making the impact that you need for well into the future. And so with that, I will just say thank you to University of Kentucky and to others. Thank you to everyone who's on for your participation in this event. I'll be staying on and attending this afternoon's sessions as well. But to close us out today, we have a very special guest. We have our Deputy Undersecretary, Justin Maxson. And Justin is part of the Biden-Harris administration and just a terrific leader and a real expert in this area of placemaking. I could go through his very long resume, but I know he doesn't like when I do that. So I'm going to turn it over to Justin to close us out with a few words and say thank you to everyone. Justin.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. This conference is so important. I want to congratulate the team on launching the placemaking toolkit. It's such a great set of resources, and having something like that available to help build the capacity of local partners is just so important. And in fact, rural development is increasingly trying to figure out how can we play a role in helping support the capacity of our local partners. You know, placemaking, it means a lot to me personally and professionally. I spent close to 25 years doing some version of this place-oriented community economic development, and almost 15 years of that working in Kentucky. I know the power of local people who share a vision, have access to resources, and a burning desire to get something done. If you're here today, you probably feel the same way that I do, that placemaking is rural economic development at its best, but we know not everybody thinks about it that way. It's not exactly traditional economic development. It's got more heart, it's got more creativity, more soul, in addition to creating results, including economic ones. Often it reflects, obviously, more of a sense of place, the culture, the traditions, and the people of a place or a community. And those are things that don't always fit well into the balance sheet of a traditional economic development approach. The ROI of a community center, a musical production, an entrepreneurial support collaborative aren't numbers that we can put in a spreadsheet. But we know the value is real. In fact, it's what makes the places unique and specific, in that we can build on the context and the culture of a place if we define it as opportunity, think about it that way, and act on it that way. So when we work on placemaking, it can be an uphill a battle, partially because of the perception of the critics. But it can also be a challenge because of the needs that any rural community has. And I don't mean only economic needs. In particular, I mean the capacity needs that some communities experience. That placemaking, it requires a vision and resources, but also local capacity. So I'm going to touch on each of those, on vision, on resources, on resources and on capacity. So vision. This obviously is the piece that has to come 100% from a community, and in some ways, in my mind, is one of the most important ingredients. I think whatever your supporting role is, as a government, a nonprofit, a for-profit, we all know that this isn't gonna work in a place unless it's their vision. We obviously can play a role in drawing it out, and that's an exercise, I think, in curiosity, in listening, perhaps a little bit of detective work as well, right? Who knows the town best? Who are the artists? Who are the leaders and the schools in sports, in business? How can we get them together, not just the regulars, but how can we make sure it's a space that reflects the diversity of the whole community, and create a space that allows them to dream and think through really what's possible in their place. And in my mind, that's part of our job as supports to help make that happen. And USDA and EDA have important resources to support communities in helping make their visions real and turn them into plans. I suspect that we all know there's resources as well as I do. And then there's the issue of resources, right? Very bluntly, there are resources out there. RD alone has a large suite of financing opportunities. Our community facilities programs, grants and loans and guarantees. We've got a suite of business support programs, loans and grants. Obviously, broadband, a set of tools to help small communities grow renewable energy and energy efficiency options, housing grants, water and sewer grants and loans. So there's a lot out there, not just in RD, but across, I think, the federal government. The bipartisan infrastructure law has included probably the largest tranche of federal resources in years, but of course it can be terribly hard to access those resources, and sometimes the challenge is that it's too much of the wrong sort of money. So at RD and other places, and I think the government, we're thinking hard about how can we make it easier for rural communities across the country to access these and other resources, which leads me to the third element of placemaking, I think, which is a capacity. If your community doesn't have a grant writer to access existing resources or the technical capabilities to oversee a project, it's much harder to turn that vision into reality. And that's why capacity and technical assistance are a priority for rural development. Because for too long, there have been rural communities across the country who've been told there's federal money out there only to be crowded out in the competition and unable to get the resources. And that's because, as y'all know, too many people in rural places are stretched thin, have on multiple hats, and they're trying to do everything they can for their places and the people that they love. I know I'm in a room of that's full of rural people who care deeply about their place, but none of them are professional grant writers. We need to make sure that rural communities, especially those that have been overlooked in the past, can access the resources that make sense for them. So the Rural Partners Network is a new whole of government effort led by USDA to transform the way federal agencies partner with people in rural places to support economic opportunity. To truly make a difference, we've got to take on this work on two fronts. It's place-based, but also through better federal listening and coordination. First, through people on the ground, federally funded and selected Rural Partners Network communities. So we selected about 10 states and about 30 communities. And in those communities, there'll be staff on the ground connecting the dots by mapping out federal resources and bringing together partners across those places, that's state partners and philanthropic partners and nonprofits who can help fill the gaps in resources that the federal government may have. But the staff on the ground will help support strong and competitive applications and help communities articulate, based on the vision, the opportunities that they want to take advantage of. Secondly, federal agencies will also be supporting a broader strategy to make it easier for all rural communities to access federal programs. These federal staff will be in the headquarters offices, but each agency has defined a staff person or team to support RPN communities, but probably more importantly, to create a new front door to their agencies for all rural communities and help coordinate federal economic development across those agencies. We think USDA is the right agency to lead this charge because, as you heard Jackie say, that we're one of the few federal organizations that is also place-based. We've got 450 offices across the country. And as she indicated, we're the only federal agency with an explicit focus on rural development. When vision, capacity, and resources all come together, in my mind, what you have are the key ingredients for placemaking. And as I know, y'all know, placemaking is really a community expressing, I think, the best of itself. I think of Hazard, Kentucky as a community right now that's pulled together an incredibly impressive set of partners, the town, a local community foundation, a CDFI, other regional development entities, and has articulated a vision of what's possible in that community, and is spending real smart efforts engaged in taking advantage of what makes Hazard and Perry County a great place to live. I'm pleased to be here today and just know, as I think you heard Jackie say, that rural development is committed to placemaking, and we want to figure out how to make our resources easier to use. We want to figure out how to make them as flexible as possible We want to figure out how to support technical assistance in communities. We hear all those things from our stakeholders. And as we think about the Farm Bill and other opportunities, these are the sorts of priorities that we imagine holding up as important to us and I think all of you. So appreciate the opportunity to be here today and appreciate your all's attendance. I know you're in this room because you believe in the power of placemaking, as do I. I'm glad to be part of the conversation. Thank you for your time and ongoing efforts to improve rural communities. Thanks, and enjoy lunch.
We're not providing lunch. Thank you, Justin, so
enjoy
very
your
much.
Own lunch.
Yes, enjoy your own lunch. Thank you so much. I think what a tremendous perspective that Justin's able to provide from, we are fortunate in Kentucky to have worked with Justin years ago when he led a CDFI that focused very wholly on community economic development, to then bring the perspective of a large funder that focuses on rural prosperity, to then be a huge leader for USDA Rural Development. That's the type of leadership that really excites us for those who are helping to build capacity in our rural communities. And we're just so proud that we have that leadership in place, and so excited for what's to come. So thank you, Justin, for representing Kentucky so well, and then for your amazing remarks. So thank you. And also for supporting this work. I forgot about that one. So just a couple of notes before we leave today for our lunch. We have just gone live with the Rural Placemaking Toolkit. So go to ruralplacemaking.com during your lunchtime and check it out. Right after lunch at 12:30 Eastern EDT, we are going to be looking at the community toolkit through a series of sessions where we'll be looking at several case studies that came from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and to help you understand how best to use the toolkit so that you can really optimize those resources. And again, I think it's really important to know that this is an ongoing effort. We all know that toolkits can be stale, and our goal is for it to remain dynamic, which means that it relies on you to provide input, to share the work that you're doing, so that others that have communities that may look like yours, that have a similar capacity to yours, that have great success stories like yours, can continue to learn from. So while we are taking our time for lunch, be sure to check that out so that you get a little bit of a beginning look at it. So when we start looking at it in an hour, it'll be old hat to you, and you'll know how to navigate. And Melissa will start us off in that session. So I thank you, Wally, who's been our amazing note taker for the last session, has placed that link in the chat box. So I appreciate that. And so, yeah, take some time over lunch, chat, look at questions, look at community, and continue the enthusiasm around this work. And we will be back at 12:30 EDT. Have a great lunch.